Should we start? Good.
Good to go. Does this give us a countdown?
No, it doesn't, but I think we are good to go. We can start.
Okay, great. So I hope I'm audible. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Insurance Executive Forum special session. My name is Saurav Basu. I'm the founder for Insurance Executive Forum. It's a not-for-profit organization. It's intended to foster thought leadership within the insurance executive community. I have spent a good part of my life working in insurance with a variety of insurance carriers, and it's my pleasure today to bring a very eminent panel to talk about post-COVID priorities. There's been a number of webinars over the last couple of months, talking about COVID and the new normal and the special situation that we are in. but we thought that insurance has its own nuances, has its own challenges, has its own opportunities, and I think it's worthwhile for us to have a conversation around where are we going from here, right? What are we seeing as priorities for the insurance industry? So that's really the idea behind this special webinar. We also have a session immediately after the panel discussion from ULSOF to talk about API integration. So we are in this special, market cycle. There's a ton of things that are being written about in the press regarding how insurance should be responding. There is the wave of digitization and digitalization and digital that's upon us, and maybe the pandemic has just has emphasized the need for insurers to adopt more aggressively on those journeys. So we'll talk about a lot of that in that session. I look forward to having all of you in there throughout, and hope you guys have an enjoyable session. With that, I'll hand it over to Mike Connor, who is the moderator for the event, and for him to introduce the panel and just kick off the panel session. Over to you, Mike.
Great, Saurav. Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. You're going to have a great time with our guests. They're deeply informed and deeply involved in these issues. So you'll have a chance to gather insight from them. Please do make sure that if you've got questions or stuff, you can put those in through the Zoom environment for us. We'll try to answer as many of those as we can. We won't be able to get to all of them likely, and some of them may be better answered offline. So we'll try to accommodate those accordingly. Just by way of background, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Silicon Valley Insurance Accelerator. Our mission is to help accelerate the dialogue and the connections within the insurance industry that it takes to build a digital generation of the industry. We've been doing that for the past 5 years. Some of you may well have been out to the events that we hold out here. And we also have an online webinar series of our own called Innovation Trailblazers. You can check that out at Silicon Valley Insurance Accelerator online. Just a quick background for me. I started one of the first computer stores in the United States in the back of a garment manufacturing plant in El Paso, Texas. Had a chance to work with a lot of the scientists out on White Sands Missile Range, as well as an Army research hospital. Then got a call from this little company in Silicon Valley called Apple. And they wanted to understand what I was doing out there that was being so successful. And then I ended up going to work for them as employee 72. Yes, I worked for Steve Jobs, and yes, I have a lot of stories that we can talk about later. So what I'd like to do is just jump right in to what we're going to go through today. I want to give a quick intro and then have each of my amazing panelists give you a little bit of deeper background of the company and themselves. And we'll just kind of go in rotation here. So Abby is the CIO of Mercury Insurance. They're a multi-line carrier, multi-state, and they provide both personal and commercial lines. Brian is from Topa Insurance. He's a very seasoned executive in the insurance industry, a known innovator and an entrepreneur. And they provide multi-line, both commercial and personal lines offerings, as well as insurance programs. And then Praveen has got deep experience as a tech provider, a consultant, and CIO for carriers. And Velocity Underwriters basically is really kind of focused on supporting coastal lifestyle, if you will, through multi-line products with a real focus on cat losses. And they're also a multi-state carrier. And then we have Tim from Slice. Tim and I have known each other, I think, for almost 5 years now. He was out at one of our first events out there, obviously a very seasoned entrepreneur, one of the first insurtechs that really kind of came to fame, if you will. And they are unique in that they both offer insurance as well as provide a platform for insurance companies to build on-demand products on. And then later on, we'll have a chance to talk to both Matt and Amit from MuleSoft after the panel is over. So with that, Abby, I'm going to turn it over to you to do a quick intro. And Abby, are you on mute by chance?
Thank you. Happy to be here. I hope everybody can hear me okay. As you mentioned, we're a multi-line property and casualty company here in Orange County. I've been with the company for about 12 years, and we have been working from home since middle of March, so we can tell you all stories about how that journey has been. And I'm really happy to participate in this panel.
Great. And Praveen?
Hey, good afternoon or morning. As Mike, you mentioned, I run the technology and operations group for Velocity Risk Underwriters. We are a monoline property MGA, technically, providing coastal catastrophe insurance cover. We are about a 5-year-old company, quote unquote, digital natives, if you will. And we look forward to having the conversation with this group.
Great, thank you. And Brian?
Hi, thanks for having me. We're a multi-line carrier with locations in the USVI and Calabasas in California. We're focused primarily on commercial insurance, so property, GL package, excess, and program partnerships that are kind of unique. So we do a web-based homeowners product from Hippo, and we're in the Canisher space as well. So yeah, good to be here, and looking forward to the discussion about how to extend ourselves a little bit better post-COVID.
Awesome, thank you. And Tim?
Hello, everyone. Tim Attia, CEO of Slice. I've spent about 20 years, just over 20 years now, in insurance and technology, mostly on the back-end carrier system side, and then over onto distribution and now Slice. Slice provides an on-demand digital platform that we use ourselves, as Mike mentioned, as well as we license to insurance carriers who want on-demand digital products or new entrants into the market. And really, really happy to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. So I'm going to start us off with just kind of an overview of what I've been sensing and hearing as I've been talking to various parts of the insurance industry here as well as overseas. But before I jump into that, what I want to do is just give you a quick overview of the agenda we're going to cover today. So this is really kind of forward-looking. Where do we go from here? And what's the leadership journey? Like, how do we as leaders kind of help champion our customers and our companies through this journey back to whatever that new normal is going to be? So we'll talk about how we're looking at the changes that the pandemic is bringing to basically consumer and business risk and how that's changing their needs and behaviors. what we and other digitally advanced companies are doing to capitalize on that new normal, prepare for it and capitalize on it. And then really how that's starting to shift and change or realign transformation or accelerate transformation and innovation priorities. And then probably most importantly is how do we start to realign the culture and the strategy of our companies to be successful in that new normal? So that's what we're going to cover today. We'll walk through each of those discussion points and try to make sure that we get room to take in questions, as we said. So basically, what we're seeing from the insurance carriers is that they're experiencing the same thing that almost every other large and or small organization is experiencing. There's an impact on revenue and costs. There's internal and value chain disruption as we kind of work our way through this. Some people are looking at staffs and layoffs, obviously industry dependent. And then access to capital as the marketing kind of slide a bit. For the insurance community, there's obviously shifting risk scenarios. We've got regulatory changes that are being contemplated by legislators and regulators. We're, prepared for a surge in misapplied and fraudulent claims as we kind of move deeper into a recession. And then we also expect litigation against some of these issues and delays in that given travel restrictions and other things. And then as customer expectations aren't met as well as they would have liked, or because they didn't understand them, or because their companies weren't available for them when they needed, we think we might see a decrease in customer trust and satisfaction of carriers. When we start to think about the future, the discussions I've been having with folks are, we really see three different recovery shapes. One is a V-shaped one, which we go into and come out of relatively quickly. Another one is a U-shaped one, which takes a little longer. And then there's an L-shaped one, which basically could be an extended period of recovery. And so as I talk to carriers and technology providers and startups, they're trying to figure out how those different scenarios will impact them. And they're trying to help their organizations lead their way through, basically whatever the impacts of those are. What's really clear is because of the changes, agile leadership is required. We don't know exactly what the social and business norms are going to be. We don't know what those regulatory outcomes are going to be. We have some assessment of what operational requirements are going to be. And what we always know is that anytime there's a situation like this, bold competitors are going to take action and go for where they think there's weakness or where they think there's opportunity for new types of business and new types of business models. So those things we do know are going to happen. From other discussions, what I've heard is that people are starting to double down on accelerating transformation and innovation initiatives. Obviously, engaging with employees and partners, looking at core processes, looking at how they can better connect with customers in the marketplace. They're obviously in dialogue with regulators and industry associations, and they're looking at what they can do to digitally support and enhance existing distribution as well as look at new forms of distribution. And then obviously work at the cultural and strategic alignment with the new normal. So trying to kind of put a framework together for this, and there's more and more of these emerging, so I'll take this one. So, the assessment here is we have to look at what the alternative scenarios are likely to be, probably put some weights on what we think of the likely ones, assess across kind of a broad spectrum of things, where we think the impacts are going to be to us, first of all and foremost to our customers, and then all the way down through the value chain. What is it going to mean to our brand? And, what can we do to protect ourselves against those things? And then looking at, given those impacts, how do we assess what our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are against those different scenarios? And then, what are the best actions to take now, midterm, and long term? So that's kind of a framework that is starting to emerge as I have conversations with people. I'm sure there's others out there that are probably deeper and richer than that, but that's kind of a high level approach. So with that, what I'd like, the other thing that I'm hearing is, people are clearly looking at where are there new product opportunities. As we start to see the shifts and changes in society, where are there opportunities for us to modify existing products or bring new products to the marketplace that address whatever this new normal is, and some of the impacts that have been seen and some of the impacts to come. And ultimately, the question I think for us as an insurance community is, what's our part in basically rebuilding and stabilizing this very hard hit economy? What can we do to help our customers, our communities, our governments get back on their feet and get going again? And can we be doing something proactively as an insurance carrier or as an insurance community to help do that? I don't know all those answers yet, but I think that's the fundamental question. We have to take care of ourselves first, make sure that our employees and customers are taken care of. But I think ultimately the question is, what can we do as an industry to get the economy moving again? So with that, what I'd like to do is just jump into the discussion, and we'll start with kind of what are you guys looking at, sensing, and seeing in terms of how customers and on the personal side as well as business side of things, how are things changing for them, and what's changing about their needs and behaviors. So Tim, if it's okay, I'd like to start with you on that.
Sure. I mean, we, like you said, I think we spent some time making sure that we were solid and stable, and then that some of our customers, we worked with some large carriers, were stable, and now we're sort of turning our minds a little bit more towards some of the shifts that are going on with some of our customers, and these could be customers, everything from Airbnb hosts through to small businesses using cyber. We're in Southeast Asia with a travel product, which we know what happened with travel with Line in Thailand and so forth. So I think, now, like you said, I think one of the advantages we sort of have, or one of the things we decided to use that we were familiar with, were some of the techniques we used when we started. Because we start, as a startup, we're always in a total uncertain world. So we're never taking the last 3 years, adding 5% and points behind us and drawing a line. We're always in an uncertain world. And in an uncertain world, we think we need to ask questions. We need to test. We need to make a lot of tests. We need to make a number of bets. And we have to expect that we're going to get things wrong. And so I think we moved into starting to test now with some customers and ideas, and there's a number of different outcomes that you talked about. But we're starting to think about testing and learning and asking questions, not necessarily taking action yet, but just trying to test to see if things are going to be exactly the same they were before, or are they going to be completely different, or is there going to be some kind of mix? And so we started doing that with ourselves, and we're using our traditional methodologies of hackathons and minimum viable products, and looking at customer journey backwards or customer needs backwards, not coming to the table with submission, quote, bind, issue, and first notice of loss. We're coming to the table with, well, what are exposures are there? What's the experience? Can they be face to face? So we're starting to look at that now in terms of experimentation, because I don't think we can answer the questions, but it's a great time to test and experiment.
Got it. Thanks, Tim. Brian.
Yeah, I think we're more focused on 3 basic areas: supporting our employees, so the health and well-being and their needs to be productive at home. So just making sure that we're conscious that it's a big change for employees, right? And that they have very different situations, right? Some people have kids at home because they're not in school. Some people have space, some don't. And so if we can get the tech right and make sure that they have everything they need, it makes it a little bit easier on them. The second thing that we're kind of focused on is a little bit more comprehensive monitoring and management of applications, infrastructure, security, and productivity. So right before this happened, we were actually running a couple pilots of some monitoring software, Azure and some things in Office, and then some application stuff in Elastic. And so that's been really helpful to see as we sent our folks home, I think we made the call about 2 days before California did to send everybody home and start working remote. We had about 85% working remote the first day, and it took us about 5 or 6 days to get the rest of them fully remote enabled. It was nice to be able to monitor and kind of have some of these things going so that we could see the productivity. And it actually went up the first week that we were remote, just based on kind of events in the system. It was the busiest week of the year. And we did a little bit of analysis on that and found out that between the hours of 11 and 1, people were more productive in their first week at home than they had been, so far that year. It was just interesting, kind of understanding patterns like that is pretty important to, the executives being worried about whether we're keeping pace, and managers wondering, how people are adapting. And so, yeah, I think we're going to be a lot more focused on insights like that. And then I think thirdly, focused a little bit more on the analytics side for our products. So if you think about the questions that we want to ask now that we know some things might be a little bit different than they were before COVID, right? So different dimensions of analytics, right? Looking at kind of population density or other risk aspects, and then kind of trends in losses coming in. And some of our GAs and our insureds are asking, we write commercial vehicles, and so what's the usage pattern on that, and how many of them are idle based on the industry or class. So it's just, if I had to kind of put a bow on it, it's really about having better information so that we can respond more precisely to needs, be it product, infrastructure, or employees.
Yeah, and the other question I wanted to ask is, are you gathering information from the end customers about kind of what's working for them and what's not, and maybe what they'd like to see in the future? Is any of that stuff coming in yet?
I think we're not at that point yet because we're a B2B. So, but we have been working closely with our brokers and MGAs. They're the ones that kind of own that customer relationship in our model. And so, yeah, I haven't heard a whole lot of information about that. It's, I think it's in the one area where we have done a bit, and that is where we kind of refunded some premiums, kind of based on, guidance from the state and such. Just understanding what trends are in the industry around that action, to rebate premiums. So usage of commercial vehicles and things like that.
Got it. Thanks. And then Abby, can we go to you next? And what you're learning about customers and requirements? I mean, sure. And I think also if you could just tap into a little bit kind of where you guys are in terms of, dealing with the current situation first, and then we'll talk about kind of what you're hearing from the consumer and customer and business side second.
Sure. We are both a B2B and a B2C company. We work with about 10,000 agencies, and at the same time, we have a direct, to consumer model as well. Our focus initially was on the employee well-being, and how do we maximize, the employment for everybody that's in the company while we're minimizing the health impact, and contribute to the societal, shelter at home guidelines. So we started around March 12th, and took us about 4 days to go home. So initially the questions were, are we stable? Are we functioning okay? And we found magically that everything's working fine. We had all kinds of monitoring capabilities to look at productivity both here and in our offshore operation. Then the question that came up was, do we need to scale down anything? I mean, we went back to our CEO and said, okay, well, do you have an outlook that says we need to ratchet down or stop initiatives or reprioritize our portfolio? And the answer was no, keep going and focus on everything that we've been doing. So in fact, IT became even more critical in many respects. And then, the third part was focusing on, how do we pivot to the new opportunities. And the first thing we had to do was to implement a give back program, as many carriers did. And that was, fairly easy, but to a certain degree painful, because if you are not fully digital, or if your customers are not all digital, then you have to essentially have some of the brick and mortar operations. So in our case, we had to spend almost $700,000 printing some checks, to be able to give back about 75 million. And even though a portion of the insured is doing digital work with us, there are many people that are not in that boat yet. In our company, we have been transforming digitally for about 10 years. So we've been on Guidewire for about 10 years. We've been modernizing and centralizing all of our policy management systems in Guidewire, adding paperless, adding e-signature, and all these other digital capabilities. So it all kind of came together and showed a lot of value at the end, because we were able to really operate in this world. And also as a CIO, I kind of feel like, I delivered a private cloud or a hybrid cloud to 5,000 employees that now are sitting in the edge and, essentially getting all the services that they used to get from the office experience. So all of that, I think, has worked out fairly well. And I think we're going to stay home for at least a few more months and see how things go. But I think from an external or macro perspective, I think there's obviously the impact to the society from an unemployment perspective, particularly the business side of the world, because we do a fair amount of commercial auto and commercial real estate as well. So small business failure is a concern. Technology disruption as a whole, in terms of the ability to digitize more. We were at the cusp of doing photo-based estimation. That got accelerated. We were looking at appraisal for home properties through mobile apps and AI. That got accelerated. So we're doing both of those now. And then we started to look at digital interfaces that are needed for additional customer dialogue. And that's all going well, but I think from a platform modernization perspective, we're still thinking about the whole platform economy and how we're going to essentially participate in that world when these agents are not there. And many of these agents are probably not going to survive or come back to a world where people are walking through their front door, and some of them are not digital. So we'll have to focus on customer relationship and try to bring back some of that relationship into the company. I also wanted to comment on your, the U and the V and the L. The fear that we have is that this is going to be more like a dance, so it's going to be a propping up and having issues, and then ratcheting down a little bit, and then maybe becoming acute again. So that's the mindset that we have, and because of that, we're not going back to work in the office, and we're taking a much more longer view of this recovery, possibly 10 years, from the standpoint of what we see out there. We're also focusing on moving towards risk-based rating, and whether it's the usage-based insurance on the car side, or California, the Department of Insurance is focused on risk-based home properties as well, fire lines and things like that. So that changes the trajectory of some of the systems that we're putting together. And then lastly, I think focus on being more agile. I think the organization has fundamentally shifted in our world. I mean, we came from a culture of command and control to a world where decision making is becoming very decentralized and very quick. So we have a video call with our top management every day, and many decisions are made in that 1 hour that in the old days used to take weeks or sometimes months. we're reevaluating the purpose of the company, the value creation, getting an appreciation for who really matters in the company, the people that really make things happen, whether you're a desktop engineer or, you're the guy that is in corporate communication that keeps everybody connected with messages. We found many gems in our staff, and the realization that our talent is really our secret sauce. And then lastly, the notion that we're becoming more data centric. I think Brian mentioned this. Data on data is becoming very important. And as a CIO, I wasn't as much concerned with my daily apps or my daily count of claims or what have you. But now we're kind of looking at this stuff every day, and we're seeing even driving behavior, through analytics and telematics that is available. Are people driving more? Are they driving less? There's a lot of data out there, and we have made it our business to start looking at this data, which I think is a really positive thing for any captain of any ship that is trying to move forward. So that's kind of some of the things that we're focused on.
Abby, thank you so much. That's a lot of great insight. Much appreciated. And then Praveen, you're out there on the coast. We've been getting storm warnings and other stuff in there. So not only do you have to deal with the COVID environment, but you've also got to deal with the day-to-day stuff of catastrophic events. So can you kind of give us a quick insight on kind of where you're at and how you see things changing?
Yeah, certainly. And I think as with most panelists here, we went through similar challenges and similar gearing up. We look at it two parts. I think part one for us is to the blocking and tackling, right? In terms of how do we pivot what we are doing and how do we do it differently in the new norm. And in that bucket, as you said, Mike, I think second quarter for some of our business tends to be the most busiest period in the commercial line of insurance. So I guess, given the 4 or 5 year old company, we didn't have to do much to transform into a remote company. We were pretty lucky in that we decided one afternoon that we're going to be remote, and the next day we were remote. So I think we didn't have to do much in that space per se. And then shifted into how do we take care of our employees? How do we take care of our customers and the distribution partners? Anything do we need to do different in that space so we don't impact any of the service levels that we provide them, if you will. So that's part of the part one. In addition to that, gearing up for the busy season, as happens in some of our business lines as second quarter. There has been some slowness in terms of submissions volume and things like that, but overall continuing very well on the growth journey that we are on. And then lastly, as you pointed out, within that blocking and tackling area, we do a lot of catastrophe preparedness in second quarter to prepare for the upcoming 4 or 5 months of cat season. I know there are a couple of storms earlier than planned here, 2 of them already. So I think it's really gearing up. How can we do? How can we adjust claims in this space? I think Abby was speaking about adjusting to property inspections in a time when inspectors are not allowed into a building. So we looked at all of those things that we have to tweak or do differently given the macro situation here, and then put some things in place in that area. That's all for us in the area of blocking and tackling, and how do we not impact any of the services that we provide. And I think large part we have been operating very smoothly in all of those areas, and we'll see. I think for a long time, we were in the business of catastrophes. Right, and then some of the cats we could model, right, like the weather catastrophes we could model and plan for it. This one obviously turned out to be a catastrophe of different size and scale, and no one knows the beginning and the end of it, right? It's a longer duration and longer period. So I think that's where we were in the bucket one, I would say. In the bucket two, which is more critical, I think, to this to this topic here is we have been spending a lot of time in terms of how do we think about what's going to hit us in the next few months. Mike, you pointed out some of the capital constraints, right? I think as we go into this period, there is going to be a lot of contraction or a lot of capital going to dry up, if you will. Our folks are going to be in the sidelines. So we have been very busy trying to prepare what kind of new products or how do we get into the game of new products, our existing products, but with the flavor to it, and how do we secure capital not only for this season, but the next outer few years, if you will. So those are the two different angles that we were approaching with.
Got it. Thank you, gentlemen. All right. So what I want to do now is kind of drill a little bit deeper down into, kind of where do we go from here and capitalizing on a new normal. And so I'm not going to ask you guys to reveal any, great corporate secrets, any of that stuff. But, let's just start a conversation with, what do we, and we've touched on some of these things, but we want to kind of walk through and talk a little more deeply about them. So let's kind of start with the customer engagement side of things and distribution. Let's see. Let's start with Abby on this one. And you touched on some of these things as well, Abby. So if you could talk with us a little bit about what you're preparing for.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in our case, we have a model where the customer has a choice to essentially get a portal account and engage with us electronically. But we haven't made it a mandate, and we also don't have, very good hygiene around customer contact information, email, text, and what have you. So I think this new world of, digital has made it a big mandate for us to focus on good customer identity management, and I think that's a whole world by itself, master data management followed by customer identity management. So we're very focused on, how to really get that right. Our distribution model is in good shape, with the way we work with the agents and, the agent portal and the communication that we have with the agents. So that has not changed in any way.
I was going to ask you, how ready are most of your distribution channel to work digitally?
Well, I mean, they're working with us in many ways. I mean, you've got the multi-rating world, the products like EasyLink and FSC and so on. You've got the multi-raters on the web with aggregators, and all of that platform is already there. We've been a platform play for many, many years through APIs, and we have MuleSoft here today to talk about some of what that means. So that world, I mean, I kind of look at our business. We're Walmart, we're Amazon, but we're also a price grabber type of, operation. So all of those three components of our distribution model has to work. And to the degree that we work with our agencies, they're using our portal, and they're also using their own agency management system to write business. And that has not been impacted. The renewals, those types of things are in good shape. But there's always opportunity, and there's leakage in lead management, and there's things that we can do to grow the top line that we need to capitalize on. And I think that whole world, centers around making it more frictionless, both for the customer and for the agent to work with us. And that's a bar that's very elusive for us to essentially rise to. And I mean, as Saurabh knows, we have been focused in the last 18 months or so, focused entirely on customer experience. And there's a lot that needs to be done there, because you've got the millennials, you've got the older generation, you've got the people who have multiple products with you, and the transactional ones. So we're, like any other business, we're trying to please all of them. So that's difficult.
Good. Thank you. All right, so Praveen, let's go back to you. And kind of what's your outlook on this, and what are you preparing for?
Yeah, from a customer engagement, for us, customers are two parts, right? We have agencies and brokers that write business, the distributors for us, and then the end policyholders. We are a step removed from them for the most part, except when it's claims or policy processing and stuff like that. So what we are doing in this space is really about how can we accelerate some of the initiatives that have been on the docket, if you will. How can we bring them forward? An example of that is we kind of put mobile engagement for the customer a bit of a back burner, but I think given the conditions, we felt it's something that we can quickly bring it forward and take advantage of situation and bring it out to the market so we could see more adoption. I think some of our policyholders are if you will, given the nature of our business, our secondary homes tend to be demographic of older age because we do in coastal and catastrophe zones. And there is very little mobile engagement from that age group, if you will. So what we thought is we use the situation and push some of those mobile engagement tools, both from a servicing perspective, and I think as Abby was pointing, we also pushing some self-inspections down. I think given if we can't send the inspectors out, or here's an option, how could you provide self-inspection both from a homeowner's perspective and a small business perspective? Push those things that have been naturally been pushed over a period of time, but we brought them forward and then pushing them so that way we can get more engagement and more traction in the new model.
Got it. Thank you. Brian? Are you on mute?
Yeah. So yeah, we're, like I said, we're a B2B, so we're focused on our brokers and MGAs. Two of our strategic themes revolve around being easy to do business with and efficiency. And so we're using this time to kind of accelerate or broaden our automation initiatives. So for instance, submission automation, because I think that, everybody's kind of struggling to find the normal model for going forward. And the more parts of our business that we can automate and make it, just really simple for people to do business with us, that's going to benefit us. So that's been our focus, and then getting them better information. As others have referred to, data is a hot commodity, and I think people have a little bit more time on their hands to do a little bit deeper dive these days. It just seems like, with less interaction, there's probably less interruptions and such. And so at least I've noticed some of my stakeholders taking a bit deeper dive. And so being able to provide them those analytics in a way that's, easy to use, convenient, timely, puts it at their fingertips is nice. And so, that might look like giving brokers information on how their book of business is performing, or opportunities that they have, or trends that we see. So yeah, I mean, it hasn't been a huge change for our strategy. I think, we spent the last 4 years transforming, moving stuff to the cloud, getting on a new platform, and implementing things like MuleSoft so that we could kind of, connect things and seamlessly integrate. And now we're just kind of leveraging those tools as best we can to serve the kind of different world we're seeing.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, so we did get a question. I think we're answering that as we go here about how is this shifting your transformation and innovation priorities. So I think we're answering that question. Tim, so you've got your feet in multiple worlds here. So what does this look like to you? What are you sensing both from the carrier customers that you have, as well as from your own customers, in terms of what the expectations and changes will be in customer engagement and distribution?
Yeah, I mean, we've we have a different scenario, right? We didn't have to sort of move to the cloud because we started in the cloud. I've always worked from home, so from the day one that we started Slice till today, I worked out of my home. So for me, working from home was like, yeah, I do that every every day. So when people want to do video, I'm like, really? What do we want to do video? We already learned that video is not effective for everything. So now, so we learned that, no, we have to be back in offices, that there is going to be issues if we're all remote for a long period of time. We had a flood at our office once. And so we kind of know that the answer isn't everybody's remote, everybody's in one place. I've always worked out of my home. So I'm not in my home now, but that's a little bit different. But and if the CEO is working in their home from the beginning and everything's in the cloud, we look at different issues. So we clearly, in an area of uncertainty, we clearly have an advantage, right? So our platform, whether you're looking at it being used by Duo in Canada, which has 5, 6 products out in 10 provinces and maybe 10 employees, to the cyber product with AXXL, where we don't even have a screen for an underwriter. You can't have an underwriter because there are no screens. Clearly that's an advantage, right? So looking at uncertainty, and uncertainty becomes an advantage. And so we're testing more about how that can make us, less fragile and take advantage, because clearly this levels the playing field, because we now can operate in this environment while other people are trying to figure out how to work in this environment. So it clearly it levels the playing field, because any other incumbent in the past would be able to just draw the line, and I'm going to increase my premiums by, and now they're also sitting in the same environment where they're reforecasting every week, and they don't know, and they're uncertain about their customers, and you can't, how do you handle a COVID claim in a call center when you can't have people in a call center? And so it levels the playing field to the point where, we've moved. So one of the things we did is we launched virtual hackathons. So we've always done hackathons to put new products out, because we have to explain to carriers how to do an MVP. Carriers love to put out perfect products. We put out MVPs, right? So we want to get them in the market and test. We always work from the customer backwards. We need to know what the customer needs is, what the exposures are backwards. So
just a quick second, Tim, sorry to interrupt, but
Sure.
So, what I'm hearing from you is, from a customer engagement and distribution standpoint, this is where you started with a digital model, right? This is kind of where you live and work.
We want uncertainty, right? We want, but back to how you open it up. It's how do you protect people?
Yep.
Do you want the government, bailing out, or do you want to be able to protect small businesses? As small businesses go back to work now, they're going to have issues. They're going to have exposures. They're going to have to continue to operate. How can you get in front of them? How can you get products to them quickly? That's what we're built for, right? We're built for. And so even virtual hackathons, right? We had to deal with them in the past because we have customers in the UK and Southeast Asia, but now we just went out and said, hey, you want to do a bunch of virtual hackathons, some of them around COVID, some of them around, noise and underwriting and claims, more around, being able to do those things without people. And then it's all about testing and learning, but that is the advantage in this environment for how we're set up, is that we're sort of built for uncertainty and how to take advantage of it.
Yeah, so I'm going to bridge these two, because I'm going to move us into the discussion about business and product models. But basically, right now, what we're in a dialogue with you about is kind of what you're doing and how you're approaching sensing and building quickly to meet new and emerging opportunities and demands, right? And what I heard loud and clearly is you're really focused on sensing that marketplace. You're focused on how do we basically test and evaluate the real opportunity and demand for that quickly, and how do we do that by getting minimally viable products or business models out there. And it sounds like you're also working with your carrier partners to explore some of those new opportunities and areas.
Exactly. We offered it broadly to anybody who wanted to participate, and we got a very, very positive, large response from people we're working with or not working with to test products across lines, because it's a way to look at how you're going to be able to operate in sort of the future, the next environment. And it's going to be whomever tests and learns quicker and makes the most mistakes that I think is going to sort of capitalize out of this. And you don't want to have the same level of fragility going into the next, because it's going to come again. And we all know, unfortunately, so, People working in the cat world, unfortunately, sometimes, 5 buses show up at the same time. So, it's how do you make sure that you can capitalize in an uncertain time, in a time like this. And by the way, make sure you can protect people coming into it. So I think that's the opportunity.
Great. So now I'm going to contrast you because you guys are small, kind of fleet on your feet, agile. Abby, I want to jump to you now and say, because it's got to be just a little bit different, sitting on top of a 5,000 person organization that's been in business for a long time, et cetera, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about where you guys are at in terms of looking at new business and product models as these newer challenges and opportunities emerge, and what your approach is for that?
Sure. I mean, obviously, we have to look at the business itself, and as you all know, there's transformational things happening around your footprint. I mean, companies like Nationwide have already announced that they're going to shut down a lot of their offices and have a couple of, hub locations. So we're looking at it from a real estate perspective. Years ago, we went into a hub model already, but we still have lots of offices. And as we kind of do this COVID overlay over our real estate, there is obviously a calculus that has to happen there. So that's as far as the fabric of the corporation is concerned. As far as the products are concerned, we actually have been working on commercial multi-peril initiative, and that's actually going live June 1st. But
Congratulations.
but you can see what's happening to the commercial and habitational type of real estate, and we're positioned to take advantage of that industry, as it kind of bounces back, which is great. More importantly, I think the whole notion of usage-based insurance is becoming a reality for carriers like us. So we're focused on capitalizing on that. And digitizing the business as best as we can, and taking cost out of and friction out of the customer interactions is what we're focused on. On the new products, I think for the most part, the struggle we have as a company that writes home policies as well as car policies is the kind of pandemic that you deal with. If you guys just go back 24 months. Remember how many fires we had, particularly in California. And so there's this, love of nature, in a state like California where people are living on the edge of, the wilderness. And then you got New York with the love of the skyscraper, and nobody wants to get into that elevator anymore. So where is the balance? I think what is going to happen to the society from the standpoint of, commercial and real estate business? That's still, many risk factors that we have to deal with. And when we decide where to write policies and how to mitigate these two types of pandemics, if you will. Then you get into the car side of the business. And I think, there's going to be significant shifts in our industry. As you all know, insurance has been, had a target on its back for at least 5 to 10 years as the biggest, the most ripe segment of the industry for transformation and disruption. And I think that is only going to accelerate, and people are nibbling at it from different side.
I mean, people like Tim.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
People like Tim.
Well, I mean, you got the Lemonades and you got the Metro Miles and, all the companies that are trying to create a better mousetrap. But I think the bigger challenge for insurance is the concept of trust, the trust between the corporation and the consumer. And, how you enlarge and enhance that trust. And you can only do that through transparency. In other words, the consumer is going to be a lot more educated, coming out of this pandemic. Mm-hmm. Most of our consumers had no idea that their policies were priced based on the amount of driving they do. And now they're told to call in and get a rebate, because they're not driving. And that consumer base is going to be a much more astute shopper and will look for value in the market. And then when they make claims, they're going to be looking at the best experience. So I think we're focused on how do we make the claim experience better, and how do we make our prices be the best in the market. And I think the rest will kind of sort itself out the way we see it.
Great, thank you. And Brian, kind of what are you guys looking at, thinking about in terms of, business and product models for this new normal that's coming? Or how are you approaching that first, I guess?
Yeah, I had a conversation with our VP of product yesterday about that exact topic. And I think that, we had some initiatives in motion. We're rolling products in the CanAssure space across 20 plus states. So that just continues. We rolled out a new, like a BOP package hybrid last spring in a very conservative way so that we could get some data and then refine that model. So we're in the process of doing that. So, largely the trends that we had in place about, product development we're just continuing our prior focus. And then, as I said, focusing on, being easy to do business with and being as efficient as we can be with lighter touch, right? Because if people have an easier process for doing that, perhaps they can be more efficient from home. So yeah, it's not a massive change on the side of product development or even distribution. I mean, we've got a plan and we're executing to plan. So
got it. Thank you. Praveen?
Yeah, certainly. I think just to bring it back, I think, Mike, you mentioned earlier, the way we see it is, I think the capital in the industry is going to become smart from a return on capital standpoint. And also the capital is going to either be on the sidelines or shrink or try and look for deploying that capital in places where there is a better return, if you will. So as you can see, the macro market from a property and casualty standpoint, it is hardening quite a bit. It's not, I wouldn't say hardening, it's very hard now if you look at the rates that are going up across the board and more both on property and casualty side. And the reinsurance capital is becoming smaller and smaller, if you will, from that standpoint. So I think if you take from that end of the value chain and come into what some of us or all of us need to do, and that's how we have been thinking about where do we take from a new product, what can we tweak in our new business model, if you will.
So i.e., where is the capital going to be, right? And then how can we design product for that?
Correct. And how do we price for so the capital has a better return versus what we have been doing in the past. So towards that, I think, not that we had any early insight, if you will, but we have been working on some of the non-admitted E&S products in our coastal markets. And we did contemplate about holding back or not, but about 4 to 6 weeks ago, we did launch our new non-admitted homeowners product in the Florida and Texas markets. And because we feel that some of the admitted lines are going to shrink, either capital providers staying on the sidelines, opens up new doors for us. If you can deploy some of the capital that's available and price it well, and which you can do in the non-admitted market versus admitted market. So it's been 4 to 8 weeks, and it's been out there, and we've been getting some very good traction in the marketplace. So that's how we are approaching it in terms of kind of going back all the way to the capital question and where does the capital will be available for it, and seeing how we can tweak or launch our new products in that space.
Good, thank you. So just to kind of wrap up the capitalizing on new normal, I think we've touched on a lot of this. I'm just going to summarize this, and then if you have some other thoughts, love to have them. But essentially what I'm hearing is overall, what we're really doing is really kind of accelerating and focusing on some of these core processes, all the way from customer engagement down to underwriting, policy management, and claims, to make them more viable, more transparent, and more effective in a remote and in a more digital world. And so what I heard was, and I've heard this pretty much across the world, that where you had initiatives already underway in those domains, you're basically doubling down on them, trying to pull some of those forward, etc. So that's kind of my summary of what I think I've heard so far. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that? Okay, the answer to that is no. All right. So, and I think we've also, I think we've covered this as well, which is realigning transformation innovation priorities. Basically, it sounds like they've been either, as we said before, aligned or accelerated against those things. We've also talked about, as Tim talked deeply about, how do we start to look at the new emerging opportunities from an innovation standpoint, and where do we think those opportunities are, and what can we do to quickly test and evaluate those from an MVP standpoint. So to
Mike,
get that stuff out.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, I think Abby mentioned usage-based auto insurance. I think that's, you can't just, you can't jump over that one, because I don't think the answer in the future is we're going to rebate you, right? I think that's a big one. We're all working from home on this video, and our commercial insurance policy in our office buildings didn't contemplate us sitting at home with our commercial assets, phones and laptops and cyber security and all that fun stuff. Our personal policies, whether it's at E&S homeowners policy, coastal for the cat areas or whatever, didn't contemplate us working at home either. So, I mean, I think there are fundamental changes in some of the exposures.
Yeah, I'd also say cyber sits into that place as well. I don't think we contemplated having this many people working remotely. And I remember a discussion with another CIO where basically they said what they realized is most of the equipment their employees had at home wasn't up to snuff, either from a router and standpoint or a PC standpoint.
Or Alexa listening to you behind you. And,
yeah, thank you. Didn't even think about that. Yeah, so the net is, I think we've got to reevaluate those things as well.
There are changes, and small businesses are hurting. I mean, we're a small business, and we pay we have a lot of premium we pay on insurance, and I think there's we could have better service. So I think small businesses are challenged. There are a lot of them may or may not make it, and we don't want that situation. We want these small businesses to survive. We want people to do well. So I think, as an industry, do we want the government to bail it out, or as an industry, we're very good at, everybody here is very good. These companies that have been around for a while at assessing risk, mitigating risk, managing risk, paying out claims. There's no industry that's better suited to help people. I think we need to get in the game. It can't be just the existing initiatives. I think there has to be new initiatives.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. As a matter of fact, I talked about this in another webinar we did, which is if there were ever a time for the government, regulators, and the industry to sit down and have a conversation about how do we rebuild our economy, and how do we leverage the insurance industry as a way to do that? And what can we do to open up regulations so that we can innovate around some of those things? I think this is that time. So totally agree with you, Tim. I think we've got to get there. All right, so we're going to move on to the next discussion here, which is, this is the kind of the journey of leadership. How do we help our companies and our customers, right, realign culture and strategy to live and work and thrive in this uncertain world we face with the new normal that is, somewhat, becoming a little bit clearer, but exactly when we come out of this and how we come out of this is not known. So the net is, we got companies out there, whether it's our customers or our own, that are potentially facing layoffs. As you said, I think several folks have talked about the access to capital. So what are you guys doing as leaders to help your companies move down this path to realign culture and strategy for this new normal? So let's start with you, Brian.
Sure. Yeah, I think, one of the things is that we have a corporate parent that's very focused on the employee wellness and engagement and making sure that, you know, we're reaching out, talking to those people, having kind of subgroup meetings, and just making sure that they're okay and that they feel like they're fully supported. And obviously that involves everything from providing them, you know, the tools that they need to just communicating with them and making sure they're okay on a regular basis. But I think the other aspect of that is that it feels like the measures that we're going to use to determine, you know, who's performing and not are going to get a lot more data oriented, right? It's really kind of, if everybody's working at home, you need a way to measure kind of output, and that's a lot heavier influence on somebody's performance than if they're in your office every day having a good conversation or, you know, supportive or kind of the non-critical aspects of their work. So I think, you know, it comes down to a little bit more explicit measurement of people's output, because and we're trying to use that in a way that through dashboards and other ways to expose analytics where people embrace it. And I think especially the younger generations kind of like the idea of leaderboards and contests and things where, you know, you're, you know, friendly competition between employees in like groups.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a great opportunity for behavioral scientists and behavioral economics or economists.
Yeah, and even they're talking a lot about mental health and the aspect of being locked down for a couple of months and how you really need to maybe reach out to these folks once in a while without a work subject and just spend some time, you know, with them. So I think in the end, the cultural shift is going to be, you know, people, it will be a lot easier to measure people purely based on performance because largely that's the only thing you have to look at when people are remote, you know, and their contribution. And the analytics are all going to get better. So.
Yeah, just to kind of click in on a personal level. So as a leader in the company, how's this sitting on your shoulders? Are you, you know, are you feeling like there's, you know, things that you personally are taking on now that you hadn't anticipated, and how are you addressing those?
Yeah, I think, you know, IT folks are pretty independent, comparatively speaking, right? They're happy to sit in a corner and play with their technology in most cases. But I think trying to build, you know, the culture that we had a really nice office space. We have a small team, you know, just under 20 people, and we're close. We collaborate tightly. We have, you know, whiteboard walls and theaters where we, you know, collaborate. And so it was a big, kind of we lost some of our collaboration mojo, if you will. You know, we're doing fine. We use Teams and we can always plug in and, you know, it's a click of a button away, but several of the people missed that. And it's trying to come up with strategies to either replace that or how we go back to work, maybe, you know, 2 days a week and do strategy sessions, or how we're going to approach that longer term. And I mean, I think there really is a synergy there when people are in the same room working a whiteboard, solving problems. And so just kind of learning how to do that either on a part-time basis and or remotely is one of the things.
Good, thank you. And so we've got, for our session, we've probably got about 7 minutes left, I think. If I could get kind of a quick go around, let's start with Abby and just your thoughts on this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the biggest elephant in the room, as far as the pandemic is concerned, is this new way of working where you're not face-to-face, you're not collaborating in the manner in which, you know, we've been used to as a society. I mean, I tell my people, you know, Hoover Dam was not built with working from home. You know, Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs couldn't build Apple if they were in the same garage, you know, working together. So there's definitely an aspect of creativity that we're going to lose. We're going to gain some other things, you know, which is great, but I don't think anything great can ever be built by working from home. And so we have to get under the same roof somehow to, as a team, to be able to make, you know, great things happen. And
Yeah, I'm reminded as you talk about that, the philosophy at Hewlett Packard in their heyday, which was management by walking around, right?
Right.
And the whole objective was to get exposed to new ideas and then bring new ideas together through that process. So I
yeah,
hear
and
you loud and clear.
oddly enough, Mike, I used to work at HP, and at the time that I was working at HP back in '99, 2000, they had completely worked from home. So I didn't see my manager for 2 years. He was he was in Connecticut and I was in California. So if you're the type of employee who is upwardly mobile, who wants to become somebody in the corporation, when you're out of mind and out of sight, how do you really show your value? And I think for the type of employee that really wants to latch on to the corporation as a vehicle to grow, doing this from home would be difficult. Conversely, now as CIOs, we have access to the entire globe when it comes to talent, because it doesn't really matter where they sit. So that's the opportunity, and I think that's the balance, the yin and the yang that I struggle with in terms of what this does to realignment of culture and strategy. And then as far as how we move forward, I think the fact that we have let some of the old habits die, we could have worked from home 10 years ago, even 15 years ago. But a lot of us latched on to this concept, and the way change happens is, a little at a time, and all of a sudden it drops like a rock. And right now this hammer has fallen. And I don't know if we can get the genie back in the box anymore.
Gotcha.
So we
Thank
have
you.
to start looking at different ways of managing people.
Thank you, Abby. Praveen?
Yeah, certainly. I think, if I think about one thing around culture and leadership is that jumps out for me is empathy, right? I think in these times, how do we not only focus on results, the measures, the productivity, the creativity, the collaboration, but how do we deliberately incorporate empathy into everything we do? That to me is going to be a big measure of how we come out of this, both from a leadership and realigning culture among our teams, among our groups, because it's very easy to look at the numbers when you're remote. It's very easy to see where the results are, but how do you incorporate empathy into everything we all do and everyone else does on the in the team or on the company would be very crucial and critical in terms of realigning culture.
Got it. Thank you. Tim, any last thoughts here?
I would second that on the empathy side. I think that's very important. Some people are fine and are great working from home. Some people are challenged with it. Some people are challenged in offices. I think it's important to be distributed. I think that's important. I think it's part of being resilient and anti-fragile to be distributed. Maybe not, when I say distributed, could be work from home, but you could have just, distributed groups. But I think, for myself, it's a learning experience, right? So I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't learning. Learning is not easy, so it's not an easy period. It's a tough period. It's important that everybody understands that it is a tough period. But you also want to, stay focused and be able to be successful, because ultimately that's the key, right? The key is going to be, can you make sure that as a group you're successful through this? And so, but little things like, we were doing Zoom meetings in the morning, and I'm like, I'm done with the Zoom meetings, right? I'm tired of looking at myself. That freaks me out. And, we never did them before. So, and by the way, let's do them walking around, and let's shorten our meetings. When we used to do hackathons in person, they were full day events. You can't do full days virtually, and neither can we do 60-minute meetings or 30-minute meetings anymore. So, let's shorten these meetings. Let's not everything. It's okay to turn off your camera. And how do you do that? Is you do it yourself. I join meetings and I don't turn on my camera, and I mute, and I don't have to join everything, and I don't have to be at the virtual pub nights every week and are around the purple couch. And it's okay to take a day off and disappear for a while. I mean, I used to love being able to disappear personally, right? I can't disappear anymore, you know? So I can't just play my guitar. I see your guitar, right? I can't play my guitar on meetings anymore. It's driving me crazy. So, I mean,
And if you put it on mute.
well, if their video's on and they're watching you, right? So I think, and then they're going to ask you to play and sing something, and that's even worse. So I think you have to do it yourself, right? So if I'm going to want to just disappear one afternoon, I should be able to just disappear one afternoon, and that should be okay with everybody, right? And I think that there's no one answer, and we're sort of have to find our way through this. But ultimately, I think I'm trying to push everybody to go after opportunity, test. It's okay to make a mistake. Let's test stuff. We don't know. It's uncertain. We're going to be successful, because I think ultimately, if you're successful, then everybody will come along. And so I think that's a key. But I think you have to act it, right? You just have to. You have to show that you're making mistakes too, and that you're not doing things perfectly. And I think that's an important part of it as well.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. Really great information and insight. Much appreciated. We're going to turn this over to MuleSoft now. And, one of the critical things here really is, as we start to prepare for all the things we need to do digitally, how do we connect all those things and stay sane and have an architecture that's going to work through it? And so we have Matt and Amit coming up from MuleSoft. They're going to talk about what they're learning and experiencing as they're working with carriers who are going through this, and how basically the technology that they're bringing to the marketplace is helping that. So I want to thank each of our speakers. I want to thank Abby, Brian, Praveen, and Tim. You guys have been great. Really enjoyed, and I'm honored to be here with you guys through this. So thank you so much. I'm going to now stop sharing my screen, and we'll turn it over to Amit and Matt. So
Hey,
are you
thank
guys,
you, Mike.
you guys with us? Yeah, thank you. Hey, how are you?
Good. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Awesome. Thank you.
Give me a second. I've been toggling back and forth between the various video conferencing platforms today. So I think I've used Teams, Zoom, and Hangouts. So 3 for 3 so far.
And you missed Skype?
Yeah, I guess that's the one, the original.
Yeah,
no
the
less.
original one. Yeah.
But
now,
alas,
now it's Meet. Yep.
Somebody send me an invite for Skype, and then I'll be 4 for 4. All right. Can you see this? All right. The slide here.
Perfectly.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again for inviting us to join you today. As Mike mentioned, my name is Matt Cameron, and I lead our financial services go-to-market practice at MuleSoft. So I work very closely with our insurance customers, our customers throughout financial services, to kind of understand what trends they're seeing, how can we, adapt to those trends and build the right technology that will help solve for them. And then I'm also joined by Amit Rajukar, who's on our delivery team, and he actually is really in the trenches day to day with our insurers, helping them implement those solutions. And he's going to talk a little bit about the results we've seen on the ground, some of the concrete impacts of this API-led approach that we're going to discuss. I'm going to tee us off, though, with just a quick survey of everything that we know is going on in the industry, and some of the areas that we're seeing insurers invest in, as well as how APIs are driving success from those investments. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we've already covered it today. COVID-19 has really accelerated some of the trends that we already knew were happening in the industry. So first and foremost, of course, customer behavior is now migrating to be increasingly digital. 60% of policyholders today are now engaging in a primarily digital way. And so you can just expect to see that continue, of course, as there are concerns and limitations around in-person interactions moving forward. On top of that, there is the operational disruption that's been going on in the industry for quite some time. We know that telematics and sensors that are now on cars and in houses are allowing for new business models around usage-based insurance pricing. There's operational disruption around the claims adjustment process, using drones to do this more efficiently. And some of this is just kind of creating downward price pressure, because insurance, of course, can be popularly perceived sometimes as a commodity. And now with these new, efficiency gaining technologies that can be used for claims adjustments, for creating and underwriting policies, there's just an even stronger pressure to be efficient and be as lean as possible in delivering those operations to your employees and to your customers. And then finally, there are the ongoing demographic and behavioral shifts. We are quite familiar with the aging population in much of the developed world. There's now, of course, the surge in demand for life insurance policies because of the pandemic concerns. And insurers are having to rethink, okay, how do we design, how do we price these policies appropriately based on what we know about the underlying risk factors that are characterizing the population and the behaviors we're seeing. So all of that, was kind of already present. We're just seeing it accelerate now as we, look ahead into the next normal coming out of COVID-19. When we talk to our customers and we see kind of how they're, tackling those trends, they're investing in digital transformation strategies that we kind of see fall into 5 buckets. And the first bit is around the operational efficiency piece. So like we talked about, how can you keep costs at a bare minimum so that way you're preserving your margins in this environment where premium revenues may be down, investment returns are certainly lower with the interest rate environment, and business automation is a key to that. So everything from making it possible to get a quote in a matter of minutes by standing up a chatbot that might automate that process, through to automating the claims adjustment process, maybe using a drone or some other type of technology. That's really key, and that's something that a lot of our firms are starting to tackle. On top of that, there's also the opportunities for growth, and so deepening customer relationships by, for example, creating a single customer view. And that is about uniting all the product information, everything about their claims history, their policies, their household into one single view for your agents or even for your third parties, your brokers, to be able to use, so that way cross-sell and upsell opportunities are easier to identify and execute on. Then you can take that and extend it into digital channels, right? Build out that omni-channel experience that our policyholders expect. So give them the same single view of all their policies, their bills, their claims in a mobile app, in a web portal, even in a voice assistant now. And then continuing to extend that to the partners. So making sure that you're delivering those core capabilities to your brokers, to your reinsurers, allowing that third party, which is so critical in the insurance industry, to have the same access to data and processing capability that your internal resources have. And then finally, there's a lot of emphasis around new products and services. And that was the case before all of this, a lot of movement towards new types of product delivery and design in insurance. But coming out of COVID-19, I think I heard Tim mention a moment ago just some of the needs around cyber insurance, for example, with a distributed workforce, and standing up those types of policies using maybe a parametric approach to help actually streamline the claims process for those products is going to be very critical, as well as delivering them in a new way through ecosystems and through a platform approach. And I'll talk more about that in a moment, but it's something that as we look at the API-led approach, that's critical for enabling those new delivery models as well as the development of those new products. But kind of the reality is we see a lot of challenge in tackling any of these projects when you're taking a legacy approach to integration. And we know that 80% of IT's time today is spent just on integration, which means they have very limited time and resources for innovation because there are so many systems, so many processes that have been built up over time through mergers and acquisitions, the launch of new products, that it becomes very difficult if you've done a point-to-point integration strategy where you're just connecting policy administration with CRM or web channel to your underwriting system. It's impossible to scale and to deliver innovation when that's the approach you're taking to integrating those various technologies. And what we've seen emerge is what we call the delivery gap, where I think we're all familiar with the fact that our budgets, our headcount don't necessarily grow in strict accord with what we're getting as demands from the business. So we see over time the number of technologies that insurers are being asked to use, the number of demands they're getting from different business teams continuing to increase, starting with the cloud and SaaS applications. So standing up new cloud-based CRM tools or ERPs, using chatbots, again, to deflect inquiries or help process claims or quote policies, getting mobile technologies available for your agents to use, as well as your brokers and your claims adjusters, taking on IoT, getting that usage data from sensors on cars or homes, AI for underwriting policies. All of this has created a massive gap between what your business needs from IT and what you're able to provide with the finite capacity that exists. And so a modern integration approach is what really unlocks your ability to innovate faster and actually achieve some of what's possible using a more streamlined approach. And we believe that this is kind of what we call an application network vision. And that's about decomposing some of those core systems, core capabilities within your organization, whether they're living in a policy administration platform or a master data management system, and getting away from that monolith where all the data lives and every process has to go through, and actually turning them into services that can then be leveraged in a self-service consumption-based model by line of business IT, by your mobile developers, by third parties that maybe want to get involved and leverage some of your capabilities for distributing in their own channels. This is really where the opportunity lies. And it's fundamental to transforming the way you can respond in crises like COVID in a quick and nimble and effective way. Once you've done that, IT can get away from being a bottleneck, and there's no more, finite capacity and frustrated business stakeholders who have to go through central IT for the delivery of every project. Instead, IT can turn into an enabler. You're developing assets, you're developing reusable components that the line of business IT teams, the development teams, your third parties can use and consume and innovate off of in an independent and self-service way. And what's fundamental to making that work is what we call the modern API. Modern APIs are, they're distinct in several key ways from the legacy integration patterns and approaches that we've seen insurers take. And, there are several reasons for this, and they come down to the fact that APIs are building blocks. They are the Lego pieces that make up the composable enterprise, that make up that application network. First and foremost, an API is a very well-defined entity that essentially represents a core capability of your business. So that could be policyholder data, abstracting that away from a monolithic system where it all lives and making that accessible in a standardized interface for any of your different development teams or line of business IT teams to consume. It could be a process where you've taken that underlying policyholder data, abstracted it away, and then created a process API on top of it, which models the process of producing a quote or underwriting a policy or processing a claim. That is the first key, is that it's very well defined and it models a very discrete part of the business, a specific capability within your firm. Just as important are the fact that APIs are managed for security and governance and monitoring, and that's built right in. So again, that's critical for giving your central IT the confidence that you can enable this self-service consumption model without compromising the regulatory requirements that exist in the industry. And then finally, it's about discoverability and accessibility. So documentation around these APIs, being very clear about what they do, what they're meant for, how you can use them, and then also continuing to get feedback in kind of a virtuous cycle. So you're seeing analytics on how those APIs are being used. You're getting questions from developers that can be answered in a central forum. If there are limitations or problems that arise in terms of how they're accessing them, all of that is fundamental for using the modern API as a building block for that application network. I'm going to turn it over to Amit now to actually walk through how these APIs look in kind of a reference architecture that a lot of our insurers are using to guide their digital transformations today. So Amit, are you with us? You want to take it away?
Amit, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, great. Thanks, Matt. So hi, everyone. As Matt mentioned, I am with the MuleSoft Professional Services team. I'm responsible for delivering our solutions and actual business outcomes to our customers. But most of my career has been in the insurance industry before, right? I was with E&Y, driving their huge guidewire claims and policy transformation projects across US and UK markets. And what I've seen, I've mostly done the traditional, the legacy integration approach to those kind of huge transformation projects. But after joining MuleSoft, I also got exposure to some of the more modern API-led approach that Matt was talking about, right? He gave us a brief overview about the modern APIs, and let me now double click into what API-led connectivity means and looks like, right? What you see here on the screen is three distinct layers: experience, process, and system APIs. These are mostly like logical or conceptual layers, right? Not all three layers would be utilized for each and every integration, but then there is certain benefits that each API brings into the overall architecture. So let's start with the system APIs at the bottom. This is where you abstract your complexity of your underlying source of record, right? So whether it's your core claims or policy engine like Guidewire, or your CRM system like Salesforce, or ERP solution like SAP, your system APIs are going to expose the business objects, the domain level data from these sources of records into a set of reusable and highly secure, flexible APIs. In the words of one of my customers, right, he calls them as Lego blocks for the business. So Central IT is going to own and build these Lego blocks, and then they will be handed over to the actual lines of business to make use of these Lego blocks for actual business products, launching new products or new processes. And that's where the process API comes into picture, right? So if we continue with the same example, Central IT can build a claims API which hides the complexity of either calling your Guidewire SOAP-based claim intake, or Salesforce connector to talk to Salesforce CRM, right? So you have that claims API as a system layer, but then as a LOB IT, right? If I belong to maybe a personal lines, and if you talk to a claims director who's leading personal lines, he or she may want to have their own control on how they want to orchestrate and form the first notice of loss or claim intake for personal line claims versus commercial lines, for example, or specialty lines. So that's where the process APIs come into picture, right? They don't have to necessarily get bottlenecked by, oh, how do we extract data from Guidewire, or how do we extract data from SAP? This layer is focused more on how the business wants to shape their own business process, right? Whether it's the claim intake process, or same example around quote and buy, right? You may have a different orchestration needs for a homeowner's policy versus maybe a BOP policy. So all that control and flexibility is now handed over to the LOB IT as part of this process API. They take the control of designing, developing these process APIs. And finally, at the top, you have the experience layer. So all this goodness that you have exposed from your data and processes can now be handed over to the actual channels of interaction, to the actual systems of engagement. It can be the traditional web-based portals, right, that can be used to access. If I'm a policyholder, I want to download my policy documents, or just look up a claim status. Or I can be a captive agent who wants to run a loss runs report and see how my book of business is doing. Or it can be more modern, innovative modes of interaction. Like every other organization, carrier is looking to do business and provide customer experience via a mobile app now, right? So these experience APIs are more catered towards those points of consumption. And they provide their own layer of security, their own layer of data models, how much data needs to be exposed to an agent portal versus maybe a third-party administrator portal, or how much data a policyholder sees versus maybe a more B2B kind of a scenario, right? All that layer, all that additional governance and control is handled by the experience API. So as you can see, right, this model it contrasts with the traditional approach where Central IT was more focused on just delivering integrations, on just delivering projects. That kind of led to a proliferation of a very brittle architecture, more point-to-point integrations and technical depths. But with this kind of approach, you get the flexibility. You also kind of are able to address that delivery gap that Matt was talking about earlier, in terms of not just Central IT is working on all these APIs, right? You are not bottlenecked by the capacity of 2 members of a team, but you are also making it federated so that your LOB IT is focusing on their process APIs, and then your innovation or experience team is focusing on the whole consumer experience there, right? So that's in short about our API-led connectivity. Matt, if you can move to the next slide. I'll also quickly talk about some of the actual value that customers and companies, including a lot of insurance carriers, are realizing by shifting this whole methodology and moving to a more API-led business model, right? On the left, you see are more platform or IT benefits, how IT teams are deriving benefits from a build or run mode. And on the right is some examples of actual business outcomes and values that we are seeing more modern insurance carriers are realizing by applying this approach. So let's take the first few examples here, right? Claims intake, automation, and straight-through processing. Again, this is tied back to how quickly you can launch new products. You heard Abby and Tim and others talking about the status quo has been challenged, right? And you have to think differently about what your end consumer is going to do in these situations, how are they going to interact, what kind of experience they need. And that's where quickly launching some new products is very important. This particular example was from one of the carriers. They were able to launch first notice of loss application via mobile and text and IVR in a record 2 months time frame, right? And 2 months can be too long, too short, right? It's all contextual. But for this particular customer, launching something less than 1 year was considered a best case, right? And they reduced it to 2 months. So that clearly shows the value they could derive by changing gears and employing this whole new and API-led concept to their integrations. Next example is, again, we are seeing more and more CIOs and insurance leaders moving to a more hybrid model, right? Gone are the days when there used to be one single system of record or application that had all the business functionality in it. Now you want to make use of a number of SaaS cloud-based applications who provide their own niche functionality. And what happens is now your data is siloed, it's residing in multiple systems, but finally all this data is still related to your single policyholder or customer with whom you want to interact with. And that's where we are seeing more and more 360-degree view-based solutions, right? The example that I've provided here talks about how some of our customers are leveraging their existing CRM investment in a tool like Salesforce, and then they can be a guidewire shop or a non-guidewire shop, right? But that has all their policy, claims, contacts data, and they are bringing that together with the API-led approach, and then using that to provide better experience to the policyholder or have more ways to upsell and cross-sell different policies and products to their customers. So again, a lot of traction in the customer 360-degree area that we are seeing as part of the recent capabilities and the API-led approach. Quickly, the last two, again, very relevant with what we heard today, right? Especially in the whole COVID-related challenges. Self-service, and that too a secured self-service, is very important. Normally, the self-service use cases were limited to a very non-interactive, like check my claim status or download policy documents, those kind of use cases. But now with COVID, more and more organizations are finding that either their call centers agents are all working from home, or they are not operational to the same capacity. You may be just operating at 40 to 50% capacity. So how do you still provide that interactive customer experience? And that's where bots and AI is coming into picture. And again, due to the API-led approach and the flexibility that architecture provides, you can now quickly have that experience layer that talks to the bots, but then behind the scene, you can do a lot of complex orchestration and still provide the required data and interaction to your end customer using these bots, right? So you can still continue with a more interactive customer experience in spite of the challenges that we are facing with COVID and related capacity issues. And lastly, scalability and stability, right? The insurance industry always always had this whole catastrophic event that they were gearing up for, right? When I was working at some of the carriers like Nationwide and others, I used to remember they used to have a CAT event, and it was like all hands on board. Everyone was just focused on the whole claim intake process and giving a good experience to their customers, right, in terms of their claim handling solution. So in those kind of situations, and even today's situation when we have COVID-related challenges, having a very scalable and stable platform is very important. That directly ties back to your operational efficiency. And things like MTTI, right, which stands for mean time to identify and mean time to resolve, those can be key metrics, right? In terms of how quickly you can troubleshoot if you have any issues post-production, how quickly you can minimize the downtime and go back operational and continue to provide business as usual. So that, again, we are seeing significant benefits by some of the insurance carriers by employing some of the API-led approach and modern APIs that we talked about in the presentation before. So that's where I conclude. I hope we were able to highlight, right, how we are seeing some of the insurance carriers using these modern approaches to kind of stabilize and normalize their operations and also accelerate to some extent, even though they're seeing a lot of disruptions to their business, right, in the COVID-related situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit.
Is there any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, we'd love to take any questions if folks have them. I think just to reiterate what Amit was saying, a lot of those results were achieved maybe before COVID, but the benefits compound over time. With each subsequent project, the API-led approach can actually continue to add, benefits in terms of the speed of delivery as well as the security of what's ultimately produced. So from both the IT perspective and the business, you see a lot of, compounding benefits over the course of subsequent initiatives. So thanks again. Really appreciate you having us on today. And Mike, I'll pass it to you. If there are any questions, we'd love to take them.
Thank you guys very much. Much appreciated and really important stuff. You're going to stop sharing your screen. Great. I'll share my screen. In theory. Okay, share. All right, you guys see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay, great. So again, thank you to all of our wonderful speakers. Much, much appreciated. This has been presented by the Insurance Executive Forum. And the session has been Rebooting Growth Post-COVID, the Leadership Journey Ahead. And we've had some awesome leaders on board to share their thoughts and ideas with us. I also want to take time to thank the sponsors for this event, which are MuleSoft and Exavalue. Without them, we couldn't be doing this work, so greatly appreciated. Thank you for your help and support on this on behalf of the Executive Insurance Forum. Insurance Executive Forum. And then I want to make sure we thank our speakers. If you've got questions or follow-up, you can get back to us through the Exavalue site. There's a way to contact folks there, or you can visit these guys' own websites. So thank you guys again, much appreciated. And lastly, thank you very much to our audience. It's been a pleasure having you with us. I hope this was informative for you as it was for me. And then I want to pass it over to Saraf if you have any final thoughts that you want to follow up with.
No, I think I echo your thoughts. It's been awesome. Thank you, Amit and Matt. We know that in this new normal, digital transformation is going to be key. And we, there's a lot of functions that are being passed on to, whether it's virtual inspections that we touched on earlier, or first notice of loss with the consumer. So there's so much of digital that would need to happen as we look at both newer products as well as being more efficient. So certainly integration is going to be the long pole in the tent, as we see for most of these insurers. So thank you for that illuminating session. Special thanks to all the members of the panel. I think it's been a tremendous session, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody enjoyed it as well. Also, thanks to the people that put it together. Mike, thank you. Appreciate the extended team, including Jayati and Shubho and everyone else that made this session possible over the last few days. We look forward to more sessions as part of Insurance Executive Forum, and we'll continue this dialogue. This is a special session, but not the only one. So thank you again.
Thank you. And they can find information about upcoming sessions on the website, correct?
Yes, they can find sessions on the. They can find information on the. We'll have more. The videos, etc., would be posted on the site for people to have access to it. And I also forgot to mention Nachi, who did an awesome job along with the rest of the team. So thank you, everyone.
And then in terms of presentations, how do they access those?
I think it'll be, I got some requests offline for people to have access to those presentations. So we'll have to just huddle and figure out whether we make them accessible on the site, or which should we send it over, and we'll be in communication shortly.
Good deal. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.